The chains weren't what I expected. They weren't cold, or iron, or even visible at first. They were silence. The kind that stretched, taut and humming, between two bodies who had already crossed a line neither could name, let alone retreat from. Eryx didn't touch me when I entered the chamber. He didn't need to. His presence curled around my skin like smoke, intoxicating, dangerous, far too familiar. I stood at the threshold, unsure which version of him I'd face tonight, the predator with command in his voice, or the man who tasted like sin and spoke my name like a promise or a curse. "Come," he said. That voice, it slid beneath my ribs, low and smooth and sharp at the edges. It didn't bark commands. It summoned. I stepped forward, each pace echoing against the obsidian stone beneath me. The light in this chamber was dimmer than before, torches casting slow flames against the walls, making the shadows dance like spirits bearing witness. A single chair stood in the center, wooden, ornate, bound with velvet cords, restraints. He gestured toward it with a tilt of his head. "Sit." My breath caught, a single word, but layered, dark velvet over steel. My instinct screamed to hesitate. But my body betrayed me again. Not in obedience, but in curiosity. What would he do if I refused? What would he say if I challenged him? What would it cost me to say yes? "I thought this was a conversation," I said, voice taut, just shy of defiance. "It is." He moved toward me now, slow and deliberate. "But some truths are easier spoken when the body is still, when control is surrendered." The word wrapped around my spine like a chain, tight, hot. "You want me bound," I whispered, not moving. "Because it makes you feel in control." He stopped mere inches away, breath brushing my cheek. "No," he murmured, "because I want to see what you do when you aren't." His words sent heat spiraling low in my belly. Not lust, not yet, something deeper, wilder, a threat to everything I told myself I was. "I don't break easy," I said. "I don't want you broken," he said, eyes burning into mine. "I want you aware of every crack." I should have walked away. But my legs moved me toward the chair. Each step louder than the last, louder than my heartbeat, louder than the voice inside begging me not to want this. I sat. The velvet was warm, as if someone else had sat here before, as if the heat of their surrender hadn't yet cooled. Eryx moved behind me. I didn't flinch, but my breath hitched when I felt his fingers skim my wrists, slowly, reverently, before lifting the cords. "I won't tie you unless you ask," he said. My eyes fluttered shut. Even that felt like a chain, an invitation I didn't know how to answer. But God's help me. Every part of me listened for the sound of those words leaving my mouth. Ask me to surrender. The silence stretched, then, "Do it," I breathed. Not because I trusted him, but because I didn't trust myself. The sound of the velvet cord tightening around my wrist was nearly silent, but I felt it everywhere. A hiss of breath slid between my lips as the tension pressed against my skin, not tight enough to bruise, but just enough to remind me I wasn't free anymore. Not from him, not from myself. Eryx moved slowly, like he had all the time in the world. His touch wasn't rough, not punishing. It was methodical, as if binding me was less about restraint and more about unwrapping what lay beneath. "You're trembling," he said softly, behind me. "No, I'm not." "You are," he countered, "and not from fear." He bound my other wrist, fingers grazing the inside of my arm in a way that made heat lick down my spine. I hated how easily he could read me. I hated more that part of me wanted to be read. He moved around to face me then, crouching low so we were eye level. His gaze dropped to my lips. He didn't lean in. He didn't kiss me. But his eyes did. Every inch of them did. "Tell me," he said, voice low and intimate. "What are you afraid I'll find when you can't hide behind your fight?" "I don't fight to hide," I said. "I fight to survive." Same thing. His head tilted slightly. Survival is just resistance with a prettier name. His words settled between my thighs like heat. This wasn't seduction, not in the way most people understood it. It was excavation, and I was the ruin being unearthed. He reached for something beneath the chair, a small dish, filled with water that shimmered unnaturally. Veiled magic pulsed faintly in its depths. My pulse ticked faster. "What is that?" "Truth," he said simply, "or the closest thing to it." He dipped 2 fingers into the water and brought them to my lips. The droplets trembled. So did I. "Drink," he said. "What does it do?" Reveals what?" He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. Because that was the game. Because he knew what scared me more than any spell or pain was the idea of being seen, stripped raw and bare without even the illusion of control. I should have said no, but his fingers brushed my mouth, and my lips parted on instinct. The water was cool, sweet at first, then bitter as ash. It slid down my throat like silk, but it left something heavy in its wake. Something alive. I gasped. Shadows bloomed at the edges of my vision, curling like smoke behind my eyelids. "Breathe," Eryx whispered, rising to stand above me. The cords around my wrists tugged as I instinctively moved, only to find I couldn't. Not without consequence. The magic was already blooming in my veins, and with it, memories I hadn't invited, desire I hadn't named. The world didn't break. It shuddered. The chair beneath me was still there, and yet I felt weightless, like I was hovering on the edge of something vast and unseen. My limbs had forgotten how to move, every breath soaked in heat and magic and the haunting echo of his words. I was tethered, yes, but not just by silk, by him, by the terrifying way he saw me. The pulse of the water still reverberated in my blood, stirring things better left buried. Memories dragged to the surface in fractured flashes, blood in my mouth, a scream I never let escape, the chill of the dark, and then a different kind of ache, one I hadn't dared to name. My body remembered it before I did. The hunger, the way my skin used to burn when someone looked at me like they wanted to ruin me, or worse, worship me. And that was what Eryx did now. He watched me like he already knew how I'd fall apart, and he was just waiting. "No," I whispered, the word a breathless tremor. "This isn't real." He stepped closer, boots silent against the stone, shadows curling around his frame like smoke answering a call. "It's not a lie," he said, low and even. "You've just built your life on avoiding truth." The bonds around my wrists tightened, not by his hand, by mine. I had curled my fists unconsciously, tugging against them like they might ground me. But they didn't. They only made me feel more aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every inch of exposed skin. "I should hate you," I said, though it came out weaker than I intended. "I never said you shouldn't," he murmured. "Only that it changes nothing." He moved like the shadows gave him permission, silent and slow until he stood just close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "Say my name," he whispered. I swallowed hard. "I won't." His mouth curved, not into a smirk, but something darker, something that knew patience could be more seductive than pressure. "You will," he said, "when you understand what it means." He raised his hand, not to touch, not quite. His fingers hovered just above my skin, trailing over the air above my collarbone, down my arm, stopping just shy of my bound wrists. The magic in the room pulsed again, a low throb that matched the rhythm of my blood. Or maybe it was my blood. Everything blurred. "Why am I bound?" I asked, voice raw. "You've already broken me open. Isn't that what you wanted?" Eryx tilted his head, studying me like I was a map he knew by memory but still liked to trace. "No," he said, "not broken, revealed." I sucked in a breath as his fingers dropped, finally, to touch me. They traced the silk at my wrist, brushing the skin where the fabric kissed me too softly. It wasn't a caress. It was a reminder that I hadn't left, that I hadn't told him to stop, that I was letting this happen. The ache in my chest tightened, a tangled knot of shame and want and confusion. He wasn't doing anything I could name, and yet my body had already betrayed me, arcing toward the fire I claimed to loathe. I hated that, and I hated how much I needed him to keep going. "You think surrender is the end," he said, thumb brushing the sensitive inside of my wrist. "But for you, it's the beginning." "Surrender to what?" "To yourself." I looked up at him then, finally meeting his eyes, and the air thickened between us like something sacred and profane had just passed. "You don't know me," I said. He leaned in. His lips brushed the shell of my ear when he spoke. "I know what you taste like when you're angry. I know what your silence means. I know the way your magic coils when you're scared. And I know," his voice dropped an octave, "that you want to be undone." My thighs clenched reflexively. Heat bloomed, curling low in my stomach, and I hated, I hated how accurate he was. I didn't want this. I craved it, and it scared the living hell out of me. He pulled back, just enough to look me in the eye again, and there it was. Not smugness, not arrogance. Knowing, the kind that didn't gloat, the kind that claimed. Then slowly, deliberately, he undid the knot at my right wrist. The silk fell away with a soft hiss, like breath through teeth. Then the left. My arms dropped to my sides, weightless and aching. I should have run. I should have slapped him. Instead, I sat there trembling, pulse hammering against my skin as he stepped back. "Why?" I asked, voice like ash. "Why now?" "Because next time," he said, voice as sharp as a promise, "when you reach for me, I won't be the one binding you." I stood, legs shaking, every nerve on fire. His gaze followed me, not hungrily, but reverently, like I'd done something holy just by not turning away. And then I whispered it, his name, Eryx. It wasn't a plea. It was an admission. He didn't move, didn't smile, just nodded once. And then, like mist dispersing in the sun, he was gone, leaving me to stand alone in the space where his presence still burned into the stone, into my bones, into me. I wasn't sure if I'd passed a test or failed the only one that mattered, but one thing was certain. The chains were gone, and I'd never felt more bound.